There is a library hidden deep within the city. It does not appear on any map. It has no address. And once you enter, you must follow 3 rules, or you will never leave. I did not ask many questions when I was hired. The offer was strange, but generous. A handwritten letter delivered to my apartment, sealed with wax, instructing me to arrive at an unfamiliar street at precisely midnight. No phone calls, no emails, no listed employer. And yet, something in me knew I would go. The entrance was an iron door, embedded in a narrow alleyway, surrounded by crumbling brick. It looked ancient, misplaced, a relic of a forgotten time. No sign, no markings. Just the door and a single name carved into its surface. Curator. The handle was warm beneath my palm, as if someone had just used it. The library was impossible. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed, thicker, heavier. The scent of old parchment and candle wax lingered, untouched by time. The ceiling arched impossibly high, lined with bookshelves that stretched upward beyond sight. There were no visible windows, yet a dim golden light flickered from chandeliers above, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. There were no other staff members, no visitors, just me and the books. On my first night, I found a single sheet of parchment placed neatly on the front desk. A message, handwritten in ink so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. The letter contained only 3 rules, never read aloud from the chained books. If you hear whispering between the shelves, ignore it. They are not speaking to you. Before you leave, check the clock. If it does not show time, you must stay until it does. The ink was still wet when I touched it. I should have left then. But I didn't, because something about this place called to me. The first few hours passed in silence. I wandered the aisles, running my fingers along the leather-bound spines of books older than any I had ever seen. Some bore no titles, some had no authors, and others, their covers were sealed with wax, their pages stitched shut. Then I found the ledger. It sat alone on the massive wooden desk at the center of the library. Thick, ancient, bound in leather darker than the night itself. A single quill rested beside it, its tip stained deep crimson. Inside, pages filled with names, some crossed out, some not. And at the very bottom, the last entry, my name, written in ink that was still drying. The library breathes, not in the way a living thing does. No rise, no fall, no heartbeat. But the air shifts, moves unnaturally, as though something unseen lingers just beyond my perception. I stood over the ledger, staring at my name. The ink should not have been wet. I had never written it. No one else was here. And yet, the quill beside it dripped with ink. A single droplet fell onto the parchment, spreading too fast, too wide, as though the page was thirsty. I closed the book. The sound echoed, far louder than it should have. I turned sharply, scanning the towering bookshelves around me. Nothing. The aisles stretched endlessly, disappearing into the flickering candlelight. There was no movement, no sound. But something felt wrong. I had been given a simple task, cataloging, organizing, tending to the books. But as I moved deeper into the library, I realized there were no systems here. No labels, no numbers, no order. Just books, endless books, each seeming to appear where it wanted. Then I found the first chained book. It rested on a marble pedestal, wrapped in heavy rusted chains, secured by a lock with no keyhole. The cover was leather, but it pulsed, faintly, as though something beneath it was breathing. I should have ignored it. But as I stepped closer, I saw something carved into the wood of the pedestal. A name. Mine. I stumbled back. The candlelight flickered. The library was still. Too still. Then, a whisper. Low, just beneath the threshold of hearing. A voice. At first I thought it was the wind. Then I heard my name, spoken softly, gently, from inside the chained book. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but instead, I reached out. My fingertips barely grazed the cover when a violent shock surged through my hand. A burning pain, as though my skin had touched raw flame. I yanked my hand away, my palm scorched, my vision swimming. The whispering stopped. Silence fell, and in the distance, a book fell from the shelves, slamming onto the floor. The echo rolled through the vast chamber like a thunderclap. I was not alone. I spun around, my breath sharp and unsteady. The aisle stretched endlessly, empty and undisturbed. But I knew something had moved. I forced myself to walk toward the fallen book. Its cover was plain, unmarked, bound in a leather that was oddly soft beneath my fingers. I hesitated before flipping it open. The pages were blank, except for one. One sentence, scrawled in ink so dark it seemed to drip from the paper. "Do not look up!" I froze. The whispering returned, closer, and then a breath, warm, just above my ear. I did not look up. I turned, slow and deliberate, my chest tight with a terror I did not fully understand. The book in my hands, gone, vanished. The floor beneath me felt warmer now, like something beneath the wood was waiting. I left the aisle, forcing my legs to move faster than they wanted to. My heartbeat pounded in my skull, but the library remained quiet. The door leading to the exit was just ahead. Then I stopped. The clock above the door. The hands were missing. The face was blank. I reached for the handle, fingers trembling, twisting the knob. Locked. I checked the clock again. Nothing. No time. No movement. I could not leave. I stepped back, pulse hammering against my ribs. My breath fogged in front of me. The air had turned ice cold. A soft creak came from the nearest aisle. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. I turned back to the desk. The ledger was open again, and where my name had been, it was crossed out. I should not have returned. The rational part of me knew that. No pay was worth this. No job required a ledger that wrote names on its own and crossed them out. But the moment the invitation had arrived, something inside me had shifted. I needed to know the truth, and so on the second night, I stepped through the iron door again. The scent of parchment and candle wax clung to the air like dust in an abandoned church. The silence was thick, pressing against my skin. The chandeliers above flickered with a dim, unsteady glow. I had barely taken 2 steps inside when I noticed the ledger was gone. The desk stood bare. The quill, the book, the evidence that I had been here. All missing. Only the 3 rules remained. Pinned to the wooden surface, the ink darker than before. Never read aloud from the chained books. If you hear whispering between the shelves, ignore it. They are not speaking to you. Before you leave, check the clock. If it does not show time, you must stay until it does. The last rule sent a cold wave through me. I forced my gaze away, my hands clenched into fists. The library was different tonight. The aisles stretched further than before, the shadows thicker, the shelves taller. I walked deeper into the maze of books, each step careful, deliberate. And then I heard it, the whispering, soft at first, a murmur slipping between the shelves like wind through an open window. Except there were no windows here. I kept moving. The voices rose and fell, speaking in a language I did not understand. Some words sounded old, ancient. Others were too familiar. Then the sound shifted. A whisper closer now, not coming from the books, not from the aisles, from directly behind me. Do you hear it too? I turned. No one was there. The whisper was gone. The air had changed again, thicker, alive. I stepped into the next aisle, and suddenly I was not alone. A figure stood at the far end, tall, motionless. Its back was turned to me, its head slightly tilted, as if listening. I could not move, not forward, not back. The whispering returned, louder now. The candles flickered violently, throwing shifting shadows along the floor. The figure did not move, but something else did. The shelves shifted. I watched as the corridor narrowed, the books pressing inward as if the library itself was breathing. Then, the figure turned its head, and I ran. I did not look back. I did not want to see its face. The aisles twisted, changed. The path I had memorized was no longer the same. Books spilled onto the floor as I stumbled past them, the voices screaming now. I reached a corridor I had never seen before, a hallway lined with doors. Each door had a name carved into it. Not book titles, people's names. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering. Many were crossed out. I scanned the names, the letters scratched deep into the wood. Some were too faded to read, others too fresh. And then I found mine. The door stood slightly open. A single candle burned inside, casting long, twisting shadows across the floor. I should not have entered, but I did. Inside there was nothing. No furniture, no shelves, no books, just a mirror. And when I looked into it, I saw myself standing in the library aisle, right where I had just been. Except I was still there, standing, frozen, watching myself watch me. The whisper came again. Do you hear it too? I turned sharply, and the door slammed shut. The candle flickered, and the reflection in the mirror stepped forward. Not me. Not anymore. I should not have come back. The library did not want me to leave. I should have known when I saw my name carved into the door. I should have known when my own reflection stepped forward, staring back with empty eyes. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And on the third night, I made a mistake. The iron door was already open when I arrived. The warm glow of candlelight stretched into the alley, casting long, flickering shadows. I hesitated at the entrance, my breath catching in my throat. It was waiting for me. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. The silence was not empty. It was expectant. The aisles had changed again, wider, taller, infinite. And then I saw it. The clock above the door. The hands were missing. No time, no movement. I had lingered too long. My stomach twisted. My fingers curled into my palms. I needed to get out. But as I turned to leave, the door was gone. In its place, an endless corridor of shelves. I was trapped. A whisper slithered through the air. Software gentle. My name. I forced myself forward, deeper into the labyrinth of books, searching for something. Anything. That made sense. Then I felt it. A presence, watching, moving. Something shifted in the aisles ahead. A flicker of movement, a figure just out of sight. Not walking, not running, just waiting. I took another step, and the whispering turned into laughter. Low, mocking. Something was playing with me. Then, a book fell from the shelves, landing at my feet. The impact sent a ripple through the library. I stared at it. Leather-bound. No title. No markings. I reached down, hesitating. The moment my fingers touched the cover, the library screamed. The shelves groaned, the wood creaking and splintering as if the entire structure was shifting around me. The candles flickered wildly. A voice, not human, whispered from the darkness. You are being written. The book flew open in my hands. The pages turned on their own, words scrawling across them in ink that bled like an open wound. A single sentence appeared. Read aloud. I shook my head. I knew the rules. But my fingers burned against the pages, the ink crawling beneath my skin. I could not breathe. The whispering grew louder, filling my skull, pouring into my thoughts. Read it, read it, read it. I clenched my jaw, my chest heaving. The book throbbed in my hands. And then, a page turned, and I saw my own name, written at the bottom of the page. My breath stilled. The ink was fresh, wet. It was still being written. It was writing me. A shadow stretched across the floor, long, unnatural. Something was behind me. I did not turn. I could feel it leaning closer. A whisper at my ear. Finish the sentence. My fingers trembled. The book pulsed. The library shifted. And I made a choice. I read. One word, just one. And the screaming began. The moment the word left my lips, the library reacted. The shelves trembled. The candlelight flickered violently. And then, the whispering stopped. Silence stretched across the endless aisles, thick and unnatural. The book in my hands shuddered, the ink seeping through the pages, moving like something alive. I had broken the rule. Never read aloud from the chained books. But I had spoken. And now, something was listening. I took a step back, my breath uneven. The book refused to close, its pages fluttering as if caught in an unseen wind. The ink was no longer just words. It dripped, black and thick, pooling onto the floor. A single phrase formed at the bottom of the page. Look behind you. I clenched my jaw. Number I would not. I forced my legs to move, forced myself away from the book, away from the ink, away from the whispering voice that had wrapped itself around my name. The shelves shifted as I ran, closing in, twisting, warping. I did not know where I was going. I only knew that I had to get out. But there was no exit. The door had disappeared. The aisles led nowhere. And the whispering was back. But this time it was my own voice, software deliberate, repeating the same words I had just spoken, over and over. It is writing me. I turned a corner and stopped cold. In front of me, the ledger. Open. Waiting. The names inside were moving, shifting on their own. Some disappeared. Others bled into the pages like ink dissolving in water. And then I saw it. My name. It was no longer crossed out. It was written twice. One in my own hand. And the second, a duplicate. But this one was still being written. Letter by letter, the quill scratched against the parchment, forming my name again. Not by my hand. Something else was writing it. My breath came sharp and shallow. I reached for the quill, and the moment my fingers touched it, I felt another hand grasp mine. Cold. Thin. Something stood beside me, a whisper right at my ear. Sign it. I ripped my hand away, stumbling backward. The ledger snapped shut on its own. The shelves groaned. The floor shifted beneath me. A voice, deep and ancient, rumbled through the walls. You cannot leave unfinished. The bookshelves collapsed inward, forming a narrow corridor leading to a single destination. The chained book. It sat on the pedestal once more, waiting. The chains were gone. The cover was open. And inside, the final page was blank, waiting for one last entry. I stepped back. Number I would not be written. I would not be part of this place. I turned, running toward where the exit should have been. The clock. If I could find it, if it showed time, I could leave. I could still leave. The whispering turned into screaming. The books burned without fire, their pages curling, disintegrating into ink. I stumbled into the main hall, and there it was, the clock, hanging above the entrance, its face no longer empty. The hands moved. Tick, tick, tick. Time had returned. I lunged for the door, grabbing the handle. It was warm, too warm, like a heartbeat beneath my palm. I pulled, and the iron door swung open. Cold night air rushed in. The alley, the street outside, real, grounded. I turned back for one last look and saw myself standing inside, my reflection. But this time it did not move. It only smiled. As the door slammed shut,